I have before me a pregnancy test, a deck of cards, and an app. No, this is not the beginning of some terrible joke. These are all products designed to create moments of dignity in some of the most uncomfortable moments of our lives. My name is Sarah Rottenberg, and I lead a program in product design here at Penn. We teach our students a human-centered design process to create new products and experiences. What that means is we put people first. We start with understanding people and what their needs are, and then design products that meet those needs. You may have heard of this as a process called design thinking. It starts with empathy, with understanding what's going on in people's lives, and we use that to define a problem to focus on. Then we generate a wide range of ideas for how to address those problems. We create prototypes to put those products out into the world, and then we test them with the people who they're designed for to make sure that we've created something that works for them. It's about empathy, ideas, and prototyping. Empathy is really the starting point of this process. When we tackle a topic, we don't start with a preconceived notion of what we're going to create. Instead, we take time to understand what matters to people, and we use this to discover the role that design can play in improving their experiences. I encourage my students to look at moments that we typically look away from, moments when we're embarrassed, uncomfortable, or feel ashamed of our bodies. These are moments that, instead of designing beautiful things for, I teach my students to design products, services, and interactions that transform those shameful moments into dignified ones. So raise your hand if you or someone close to you has ever experienced a miscarriage. If you look around, you can see that you're not alone. That's because 1 in 5 pregnancies end in miscarriage. It's incredibly common. And women are not the only ones who experience miscarriage. While women bear the physical burden of miscarriage, the emotional experience is often shared with a partner or friends or family. Many of you who do not raise your hand probably do know someone who's had a miscarriage. You just don't know about it. And that's because of what we learned. That's because of what we learned in the empathy phase of our project. Most people don't talk about miscarriage. There's a group at Penn Medicine called Peace that's transforming a new model for how to care for women while they're having miscarriage. Over the past several years, my students and I have partnered with Peace and Penn Center for Healthcare Innovation to help them improve their model and ensure that more and more women get access to care through Peace. One of the things we learned in the empathy phase of our project is that no one talks about miscarriage until someone talks about miscarriage. So most people don't know how common it is. When they're reading baby books, many pregnant women skip the chapter on miscarriage for fear of jinxing themselves. And so when something does start to go wrong, they often find themselves alone in front of their computers, late at night, Googling like crazy to figure out what's happening. Once they do realize that they're having a miscarriage, they often blame themselves because they don't have information that helps them understand what's happening. And the people around them don't have that information either. So they often inadvertently say hurtful things like, "Was it because you flew on a plane?" Or they don't know what to say, so they don't say anything at all. Through the course of conducting this research, my students realized that in order to care for women who are having miscarriage, Peace needed to do more than care for women within the walls of their center. They needed to create conversations that women could have about miscarriage in order to combat that blame and help women avoid shame of having that experience. And they needed to create conversations before women got pregnant, while they were pregnant, and afterwards. Based on this insight, my students created a range of ideas, but one of my favorites is this deck of cards. It's designed to give to women after they've had a miscarriage and been treated, to help them process their feelings. There's a number of cards in the deck so women can go through it and find what's useful for them. Like this one, which is about helping women have better conversations with their doctors. This one, to engage family and friends. Or this one, to encourage women to have better conversations with their partners. As we found in this project, sometimes a conversation is the answer to transforming a moment, but sometimes it's the last thing you want. And that can be the case with taking a pregnancy test. This project started with a team of women who wanted to design products that were better for the environment. They were looking at what products last longer than they need to and identified medical diagnostics as an interesting opportunity. And then they realized that pregnancy tests hadn't been meaningfully redesigned in over 30 years. So they set out to understand if women had any unmet needs around pregnancy tests. They talked to a lot of women. As much as women don't like talking about miscarriage, it turns out that we love talking about pregnancy tests once you ask us. One of the stories they heard was mine. I don't know how many of you in this room have taken a pregnancy test, but I went through a phase when I was taking a lot of tests. It took me about a year to get pregnant, and over the course of that year, I had an increasingly frustrating relationship with tests. Each negative test was a symbol of my body's failure to do what I wanted it to do. And each test that I tossed in the trash was a physical reminder of that failure. Of course, that's the kind of shameful story that you expect to hear about pregnancy tests, the woman who wanted to get pregnant but couldn't. But we heard all kinds of stories, and a lot of unexpected ones. The image that you see on the screen is from a pregnancy test that we spotted in a New Jersey Turnpike rest stop bathroom. We heard a lot of stories of women going out of their way to take tests so that they could keep it to themselves. The woman who went into work on a Saturday to take a pregnancy test because she didn't want her husband to know she was testing because she wasn't sure she wanted to have kids. Or the woman who, after taking a test, wrapped the used test in toilet paper and then wrapped it in tinfoil before putting it in her trash can because she didn't want her roommates to find it, like Phoebe does in Friends, or like the dad does in The Affair, or like the husband does in Parenthood. So many stories of women in this incredibly intense moment of their lives, the moment where you're going to find out whether you're pregnant or not. And we heard that women had to think not what do they think about it or what do they feel about it, but they had to think about how others would react. The team realized that women do have unmet needs around pregnancy tests. The need to control who knows that you're taking a test and what the result is. And they realized that they could address their environmental concerns and women's need for privacy through a single innovation, flushability. A flushable test would help women avoid shame by giving them ownership over the experience of testing in that moment. A flushable test would give them time to have their own reaction before they had to worry about what anyone else thinks. We knew this was a good idea, so we started a company. And 2.5 long years later, we have a test that works, and it's been cleared for sale by the FDA. Meet Leah, the world's first flushable test. It's 99% accurate, it's better for the environment, and it's 100% women's own business. You can expect to see it in the market this fall. So not everyone in this room will take a pregnancy test, and not everyone in this room will experience miscarriage. But the next thing that I'm going to talk about is something that we will all experience at some point in our lives. The end of life is often the most difficult moment a family can face, but it doesn't have to feel so isolating. This fall, a team of my students started a project to understand the needs of people nearing the end of their life, people with terminal illnesses with weeks or months left to live. The team interviewed doctors, nurses, social workers, patients, their caregivers, and families. And I would meet with them each week and think to myself, this is so sad. But halfway through the semester, my perspective changed. The father of a boy on my son's soccer team and a friend died suddenly of a heart attack at 50. He was an incredibly engaged dad, always on the sidelines, always rooting for all the boys, and suddenly he was gone. A few days later, I learned of another tragedy. The niece of a friend had died in her sleep on Halloween night. She was 2 years old. While we were getting ready to go to my friend's funeral, I got a call from my 12-year-old son who was in tears. His beloved teacher had just died of an asthma attack at 42. All that loss was heartbreaking. I could not think of anything else. I'm 44 years old, and honestly, it was the first time in my life I really came face to face with my mortality. But when I met with my students to talk about end-of-life care, I suddenly realized that given that we're all going to die sometime, knowing that you have weeks or months left to live could actually be a gift for the person who's dying and a gift for their family and friends. Unfortunately, we're not all capable of receiving that gift. When someone is dying or critically ill, they often feel like a burden on their friends or family. They feel ashamed about no longer being a productive member of society. Family and friends have a hard time figuring out how to behave when someone is dying. We don't know what to do. We don't know how to react. We don't know how to engage. And then, because we're grown-ups, we feel like we should know what to do, and we're embarrassed. So often, we don't do anything at all. The role that design can play in this situation is enabling both people who are dying and their friends and families to receive that gift, helping us find ways to connect with each other towards the end of life so that we're able to share those last moments and make them meaningful. My team of students is now working on a product called Stellar. It's an app that helps somebody who is dying or receiving care at the end of life invite their family and friends to visit. And when a visit is scheduled, it prompts the visitor to upload pictures of their day, of their week, of shared moments, of shared interests. The app enables the person who is dying and their friends to create a shared moment of connection. And when that visit happens, they have something to talk about. They can talk about the pictures, making what would otherwise be an awkward moment into a real moment of connection. All of these moments are moments in which people could struggle or feel shame. But design can play a role in improving them by creating a conversation or giving people a moment to themselves, a private moment, or providing an opportunity for people to connect. It all starts with empathy. By spending time with people and listening to them, we can understand which situations are difficult, awkward, or uncomfortable. And we can learn why. We can start to identify patterns across the culture that might be ripe for change. And then we can generate a wide range of ideas for how we can change people's experiences and start to shift culture through digital or physical products. We know we're not going to get it right the first time, so we need to create prototypes and put them out there in the world and in people's hands until we finally get to an actual product that can make a meaningful difference in how someone experiences the death of a friend, a miscarriage, or taking a pregnancy test. Design can change the way we relate to each other and to our bodies. By shining a light on these shameful moments and creating products that can improve them, sometimes a little, sometimes a lot, we can bring dignity to uncomfortable moments and transform our culture. Thank you.